Hey there, I'm Max, and welcome to the Studio Update. This is our weekly show to give you updates on our AI and automation projects, to get a sneak peek at what's happening inside n8n, and to hear stories from our global community of builders. Here's what I've got for you in today's episode. I've got an update on my first project. I'm working on a tutorial series on building AI agents. Angel's also picked his first project, so we'll give a quick update on that. I've also got a walkthrough of App AI tools, a really cool new feature in n8n that makes it way faster to set up tools for your AI agents to use. And then Jim Lee from our community is going to demo a workflow he built out to help automate some of the drudgery around invoice processing. Ugh. Jeez, it's cold. And before we get into all that, Angel has picked his first project. He's working on, hold their thoughts, he's building a MITRE ATT&CK Vector Store for automatic AI ticket processing. So I had no idea what that is, so I looked it up. So MITRE ATT&CK is basically a public knowledge base of adversarial cyber tactics. So what that means in layman's terms is basically it's a database of all the naughty things you're not supposed to do with your computer that's probably illegal. Really curious about that one because as we've seen, I think so far in the AI space, the quality and the efficacy of your solution is very often modulated by prompting, but then also by context. And a global database of everything we know about adversarial cyber tactics, that sounds like some really good context, so I'm really curious to see what he's cooking up with that one. Next week's episode, he's going to give a deep dive on that use case. For my first project, I broke ground on a building AI agents tutorial series. Part 1 of that series is out now. And in that one, I cover the fundamentals of AI agents in n8n. So really just the foundation stuff. You've got your AI agent, the chat trigger to interact with it. I explain concepts like memory so that you can have statefulness between conversations. We also get into some basics on system message and user message and prompting best practices. So it's uploaded now to the studio playlist on n8n's YouTube. So if you haven't played around with AI agents in n8n right now, it's designed exactly for you. It covers some of the basics of n8n as well, so you don't have to watch other videos. It's kind of a, I don't know what I'm doing, starter kit for AI agents. And then the second part that I'm going to work on next week and hopefully upload next week is going to be all about tool usage in AI agents, because I think arguably that's the most exciting aspect of AI agents today, because tools allow them to interact with apps and services, do things like math, and it really adds that context awareness that's necessary for like most useful use case. And then if you're watching that video, please do give me some feedback. Just let me know what would be most helpful to you, and I will go do that thing. What's next? Speaking of projects, I have set up a Notion board that's starting to track my projects and Angel's projects. I'm gonna zhuzh that up a little bit and aim to make that public by next week. So pro tips, when you have expensive company equipment in the rain, bring your umbrella so you don't have to tell your boss, Luis Guzman, that you need a new camera due to gross incompetence and negligence. Next up, I did a walkthrough of the awesome new App AI tools feature in n8n. Check this out. If you've worked with AI agents in n8n, you've probably interacted with tools. What are AI tools? They're essentially nodes in the n8n canvas that allow AI agents to do things. Those could be interacting with various apps and services, making calls in the database, fetching information from a specific source. So far, you've had two primary ways to do that. You could either call a separate workflow and the AI agent could use that workflow as another tool, or you could use the HTTP request tool where you teach the AI agent how to invoke an arbitrary API endpoint. Both of those come with a whole lot of flexibility, but there's also a little bit more setup friction to using those. The n8n team shipped this awesome new feature as part of version 1.62, which streamlines how you can set up and use tools for popular apps and services within n8n. Let's check it out. If I click on the plus here, it opens up the notes panel, and in here I can see all the various new tools that n8n's added. They've added over 22 new app tools, and there's more coming along the way. Let's check out these tools with a simple Google Calendar example. So I've got a Google Calendar tool that's set up to read events. So this can fetch multiple events based on some filter criteria. Let me connect it to my AI agent. We'll run this so you can get a quick demo, and then we'll quickly rebuild the tools to see how easy it is for your AI agents to be interacting with these new tools. I'll open up the manual chat, and let's ask what events are scheduled for this Wednesday. While that's running, let's take a quick look at my calendar, and I've got 4 events. So I've got lunch, a few other ones there. So these are the ones that should pull up, okay? We see we've got lunch. This all looks correct. If I open up a meeting, it shows the call link itself right there. That's great. So let's break down what's happening in this workflow, and then we'll quickly rebuild the tool. I've got an n8n chat trigger in here. That's taking my message and feeding it into my AI agent. And then the chat model that I'm using here is GPT-4o, but any LLM that can interact with tools should be able to do this, like Claude Sonnet, for example, could be a good choice here. If I open up my AI agent, in here we're using the tools agent mode because we're consuming tools. Then the prompt we're taking from the chat trigger. So the question, what events are scheduled for this Wednesday, is being auto-piped into this node. Now I have added a custom system message in here, but that's more so to control the output format and provide some context. So if I open this up, we can see that we're telling it it's a helpful assistant. We're telling it the time right now using n8n expression, using the now method here. And then we got some basic prompting best practices, a little bit of filtering on the events here, and also in which format I'd like it to output these new events. This is rather use case specific, but just to give you the context on my whole solution here. And then we have the tool itself. What I'll do is disconnect it, and let's rebuild this so you see how quick it is to set this up. I'll click on the tools here, and we'll scroll down and we'll click to add the Google Calendar node. Now, n8n's automatically selected the credential I already have on here, but you would just need to add a Google Calendar credential. The tool description, we're going to leave to set automatically. That's a neat aspect of these new tools, is it does a lot of this stuff under the hood for you. And the resource we want to operate on is an event. And for the operation, we want to get many events because we're basically setting up a search operation here. I'm defining the action that we're allowing our AI agent to make in my Google Calendar. This is a great example of how n8n is enabling you to add guardrails to your tool's usage so that your AI agent is doing more predictable things within your apps and services, which is great when you need peace of mind, for example, that it can't delete resources. Okay, the next thing, I'll just select the calendar that I'd like to monitor for. I don't expect there to be many events, or at least not more than 50, so we don't need to return all. And now in the options, we do want to add the before and after options. So these are basically filter fields. So in here, it expects a date and time, and it'll return any events after that time, as well as before this time. We want to allow our AI agent to populate these things so it can do queries like, give me all events for a certain day or a certain period of days. So in order to do that, what I'm going to do is change this to an expression, and I'll start typing expression with my brackets here, and then I'll hit $ and then from. This is going to show the from AI method in my autocomplete here. And you can see from the inline documentation that it expects 4 different arguments. We've got the key. This is basically the name of this variable that we're going to allow our AI to populate. We've got the description for it, which is helpful to describe what kind of information it expects in here. Then there's also the data type and a default value. In this case, I'm just going to define the key, and we'll just use the exact same name as the name of this parameter here. We'll copy that, and let's do the same for before. We'll set it to an expression, and we'll change it to before. Now, my advice whenever you're using AI tools and adding context and descriptions is less is more. Try without adding a bunch of descriptions. If it's working, leave it as such. Only start to add descriptions once you identify cases where it's not working, because it's going to add more usage costs because there's more tokens being sent along to the LLMs. As the models get more capable and get updated over time, those guardrails that you add on, that description, for example, could actually limit a more capable model. Okay, so now that we're only allowing our AI agent to populate these filter conditions and otherwise just receive a list of events. Now that I've done that and it's connected, let's clear my execution data from my previous execution and let's test that again. What events this Wednesday? And we can see we've got a very similar response, so it's reproducible. If we test this again, yep, it's opening those up correctly. So as you can see, in a few quick steps, we set up this Google Calendar tool that my AI agent can now interact with. Now, this is the get all events action that we set up. So I could, for example, duplicate this and connect it. And perhaps we want to also be able to create an event. So we would do that. And for the start time and end time, I might set something like, let's see, from AI and start time, for example. Same for end time. We'll probably want a few other parameters that it can control as well, like description. So for here, I might write event description. This is maybe a good case where you would want to use the other arguments available in this method, i.e. the description here. So I might say, add a short event description, ensure XYZ is included, right? So the key points to remember when setting up a tool is that you're still going to have to define the action that it can do. So certain jobs that you want it to complete, for example, to book a calendar event, you'll have to break down into two separate actions. It has to first be able to get your events, to understand what your calendar availability looks like, and then a separate tool to actually create events. And then once you're setting up a tool itself, anything that you do want the AI to be able to manipulate, you'll have to use an expression inside a parameter within n8n and use the from AI method. And again, there's inline documentation on how to fill that bad boy out. This is a relatively new feature in n8n. There's 22 app tools available today. More are scheduled by the n8n team. But when you're working with an AI agent use case and you don't see a native app tool for that, you can always set up an HTTP request tool instead, which allows your AI agent to consume arbitrary API endpoints and define the parameters it can and cannot control. Or you can even have it call an entire n8n workflow, which would allow you to use the hundreds of different apps and services that we do integrate with natively today in no code. Hey Max, thanks for that one. Super insightful stuff. All right, what's next? Last but not least, Jim Lee, a prolific builder in our global community, was gracious enough to get on a call with me and show me a workflow use case he built out to help him automate some of the manual, boring parts of dealing with invoices. Is there any fun parts of dealing with invoices? I guess the getting paid part. All right, let's go check out what Jim built. Hey everyone, it's Max here, and I'm joined by Jim. Hey Jim.
Hey Max, everyone.
How you doing today, Jim?
Yeah, I'm doing good. Yourself?
Fantastic. Oh, I'm doing really well. You're our inaugural guest for Flow and Tell, so thanks so much for joining. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.
My pleasure. So Jim, before you walk us through your workflow, would you mind telling us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, so I'm currently a freelance developer working with automation AI, and I'm using n8n for a lot of client work.
Very cool. And so I've heard that you have an invoicing workflow for us. Could you tell us what the workflow is, and then perhaps what inspired you to flowgram this out?
Yeah, for sure. So my workflow here is invoice reconciliation. So the automated process of receiving invoices, extracting the numbers from it, and then storing it in a data store, like a spreadsheet. What inspired me was having a long history with working with operations and the manual processes for importing invoices, which is very time consuming. I came across OCR a long time ago and been inspired to find alternative solutions to do better OCR today. So I came across vision language models and found that they're performing really well in doing this job.
Gotcha. So you're basically taking what folks would usually do with OCR and using vision models to extract information from invoice PDFs. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, very cool. And so for the folks that perhaps aren't in finance or don't have to deal with as many invoices, the lucky ones, what's the process look like before sort of automation entered the picture? Like, what does someone have to do manually when they're doing this kind of task?
Yeah, so you would receive the invoices via email and you would print them out or have to put them in folders. And then you would have to manually reconcile against purchase orders and manually do the data entry to put that data in.
Do you have an estimate of how long that would take?
Yeah, I mean, I know people whose entire job is to do this for the entire day, like supplier invoices, vendor invoices. Yeah, you can imagine it's a lot of work for manual entry.
I can imagine that invoice on Friday at 4:45 p.m. is a real grind. Great. So could you walk us through your workflow and how you automated the solution so someone doesn't have to spend their whole day doing this?
So we'll start, here is kind of a brief overview of the workflow and just very briefly downloading the kind of PDF, converting it into a single image. So the invoice single image, then using the AI agent to do the reconciliation, the extraction and reconciliation in the Airtable. Now, if I can, I'll pop over to the Airtable I have for this demonstration. And here I got a finance chart where we have a purchase order, which is approved, and there's an empty invoice number where we'll do the matching later on. The second tab is for invoices. So this is where we actually capture the invoice data from the extraction. And you can see it empty at the moment.
Looking at the invoices, all these columns here, like file, purchase order, vendor, is this the information that someone would have to be manually extracting before or using OCR to do? Okay.
Exactly, especially the line items. So this agent, what it does is it reads the invoice it will add like I said before, it will add the invoice data to the sheet. It will then query the purchase order sheet for a matching purchase order number. And if it has, it will update the purchase order status. Finally, once all that's done, it will send a notification to Slack. So it will send a notification to this channel, notifying the channel that an invoice was accepted or rejected.
Would you mind running the workflow for us? And then perhaps we could inspect the key parts and have a look with some populated data.
Yeah, for sure. I'm going to hit test workflow now.
And so what Jim's done here, he's got his Google Drive trigger pinned. So it's just taking some pinned data for testing purposes. But once this workflow is activated, that would run automatically every time there's a new file in the folder. Is that right?
Yeah, that is correct. Yeah.
So it seems like, so we've converted that invoice to an image, right? And now we've sent it to our AI agent and it's doing the magic right now. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay,
yeah.
very cool. And I noticed it, something is that you even added the Slack as a tool there. So you're not running it afterwards. You're having the AI agent itself send that confirmation message. That's very interesting. I haven't seen that pattern before yet. Very
Yeah,
cool.
it's fantastic. Yeah. So Notice tools, a recent kind of addition to AI features, allows you to do this very easily. So we finished, and if we go back into our sheet, so in our purchase order sheet, we can see the status was updated to invoice accepted, and the invoice number was populated here. Going into our invoice row, we can see the invoice number, the purchase order number which is recognized, the vendor address, total amount, and the line items. And then finally, if I go into the Slack, I can see the message generated here, and then the message just a quick confirmation that it was successfully added.
Wow, very cool. I can imagine for anyone whose job involves anything to do with this is a rather exciting thing to see. Would you mind, Jim, back in the workflow, seems like a lot of the magic is happening inside this AI agent. Could you walk us through the key steps and how that all comes together?
So this is a tools agent, and the input, as you can see, is an image. So I can here, and this is the invoice image. So this comes to two parts, system prompt and the text prompt. So the system prompt, it says it is designed for invoice reconciliation, and it has 3 steps, all very natural language, no kind of funny kind of prompt tricks or anything like that. So first step is add the invoice details to the table. Second step is to query for the purchase order number, and if you do find it, to update the purchase order role in the table. And finally, the third step is just to send a notification message to the Slack channel. And in the text prompt, it's just saying that this is the given invoice, which is with this toggle activated, is to send binary images to the agent and just a file URL so they can fill in that sheet. Now, what I'm not doing is saying convert this invoice into another format, such as Markdown or text or extract the numbers. I'm just telling it generally what I want to happen.
My first takeaway is how little there is in here for it to get its job done. You know, I would have expected, even with some of the examples I had, is that you need a lot more specificity.
I think as models get smarter, more capable, being too specific might limit what it understands it has to do. It may be crutches that you use for older models, but in newer models they may be unnecessary and maybe actually negatively affect the goals if it's kind of misinterpreted. Definitely keep it simple. I don't think you need to be a developer to write these prompts. Just a clear and concise instructions is fine.
And it seems like you've got like numbered steps on how to break down the task. Is that something you're doing common across your AI agentic workflows?
I do, yes. Especially for these type of workflows where not more much of a conversation, but rather sort of instructions, like you would do to like a colleague, or passing a number of steps, clear, concise steps. That's usually a better approach to get what you want.
Makes a lot of sense. Okay, so this is the AI agent. We got a pretty simple system prompt. We see we've got a few options there. It looks like you're automatically passing through the binary images, right? So that's that invoice file coming in. And Jim, before we have a look at the tools, could you quickly walk us through which LLM model you chose and why?
So I used GPT-4o, which is currently the best OpenAI model. Usually you can go with other models for kind of cost considerations, but you want a multi-model model for one to enable this. But I think it works best.
Could you walk us through some of these tools that you've got set up here?
So this is the Airtable tool. I use 3 of them. This one queries the purchase order table. So here, what I'm doing is I'm going into the Airtable within the right table purchase orders, and then running a filter by formula, where the filter by formula is the order number equals, and then the agent fills in the purchase order number that it sees on the invoice. And here it returns data. Second most interesting one is actually adding the invoice entry. So this is the create or create an update operation. And here we ask the AI to fill in these columns with the data C. So here I'm using the expression from AI, which is a new expression you can use. And this just adds in the placeholders, as it were, into these columns. So here I'm saying, get the invoice number, get invoice URL, purchase order number, the vendor name, the address, invoice total, and sort of line items.
And can you quickly walk us through this from AI variable, like crash course? I don't want to read the docs. What's like the 10-second how to use it?
Yeah. So enable expressions, and then you put from AI, and then you just basically give it a variable name. So in this case, where I put vendor name, I didn't need to put any kind of descriptions. I didn't need to put any like where would you find it on the document. I just say, just give me the vendor name that you see. And we have to remember nothing on the invoice says vendor name. Right? It doesn't say, it's just the name is on there, which it infers is the vendor. So it's really impressive.
It really is impressive. And I think it really highlights like that you do not need to be a developer to do some of the most powerful stuff in here.
Finally, we'll move on to the select tool. And here it's a message send operation with the channel predefined. And then in here, what we're doing is very similar to the previous tool. We're just using the from AI variables, just defining it to reply in a certain way. Say the invoice was added successfully or it was rejected. Once everything's done, the agent knows to use this tool to send a message to Slack. More importantly, it doesn't send it before, it doesn't send it in between. It knows to use this tool at the very end to send that notification.
I'm curious, why did you choose n8n to build this solution?
So I've been a big fan of n8n for a long time. I used to be a developer, but I'm definitely more a programmer today. But yeah, the amount of code you would need to put something like this together, it's a lot. It's a lot. And n8n allowed me to build something like this in this particular workflow, like in an hour, and more comprehensive workflows in like days, rather than weeks and months.
Makes a lot of sense. I mean, I'm a flowgrammer, so you're speaking my language. And Jim, is this something that folks can duplicate? If someone's inspired by this, how could they go check it out?
Yeah, so this workflow will eventually make it onto my creators page, but I have a creators page on n8n, and you can check it out there with I have other templates which utilize this technique using sort of binary images with agents, and you can definitely check them out there.
Very cool. I highly recommend to everyone, go to Jim's page. It's going to be somewhere, I don't know, above, below on this video. I would also recommend, even if it's not your specific use case, you can learn so much from inspecting the AI prompts themselves and how they're written and whatnot. For any inductive learners, if you learn by seeing things that are already built, Jim's workflows are going to be an amazing resource for you. And Jim, outside of your template creator page, where could folks follow you if they like what they see?
Definitely check out the community forums. Quite happy to share on that. And yeah, connect with me on LinkedIn and on Twitter.
Fantastic. Well, Jim, thanks so much for your time. Also, I really appreciate you being my guinea pig. You were the very first Flow and Tell guest. So I really appreciate you taking the time to share your workflow.
Thanks a lot, Max. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure. Until next time. Ciao, ciao. Awesome stuff from Jim there, and wow, that Max guy, what a great interviewer. This week, I've been having multiple calls with other builders around the world. I met with Devin Cairns from Custom AI Studio and a few other folks. So there's more of these coming. That's all she wrote for this week's episode. I'm real curious what you liked, what you'd like to see more of, what you think I should do less of. Although the cheeky banter is definitely non-negotiable. That's just kind of part of my personality. And you know, I'm 30 now, guys, so I'm kind of over the thin veil of corporate platitudes, so that's definitely not going to change. So drop a comment, hit that like button, and help me during performance reviews. And we'll catch you all next week for another studio update.